In this private investigator tutorial, we're going to talk about a background check. We're going to do a deep dive, and it's a tragic story following a woman and her descent into what I think can only be called deep addiction with drugs. But we're going to look at this as an example of how much information you can flesh out, starting with very little bit of information, but look at the narrative of it as we go along. Hi, this is Larry K. with ShadowAnyone.com, the creator of the Investigator's Ultimate Guide series. Go over to Shadow Anyone. You can check it out. All sorts of tutorials. This is part 1 of 2, private investigator training. Part 2 will be posted later, and it will be available for free, but it will be going into my paid public records course. That is an invitation-only course. And so if part 2 of this training is up, watch it, learn from it, enjoy it. Otherwise, it's in the paid training. In part 1, we're going to introduce you to the woman we're doing a background check on, so to speak, and look at some petty crimes. And as the addiction grows, how the crimes get more and more serious. In part 2, it actually gets into her prostitution. We're going to look behind the scenes at 2 different police prostitution stings that were handled very differently and explain why they were handled very differently. Let's get started on part 1. So when you're doing a background check for maybe pre-employment screening, you're probably not going to go as deep as we're going to go here. However, when you're doing a background check for something like child custody or some other large serious thing, you will go in depth like we're going to do here. So on most background checks, you're going to do like an address history verification and search. You're going to do verification of certain things like social security number, date of birth, that type of thing. And then you're going to eventually probably get to the criminal history element. That's what we're going to concentrate here on today. As usual for this type of thing, we're going to start with the county clerk's office for the courthouse. Your criminal record searches are always going to be best done at the county level. And the first thing we're going to do is bring up the court index, the criminal index. So punching in the first and last name, if we hit the search button, up comes a variety of things. Now again, let's remember we're starting with just, in this case, just for example's sake, a name. So you can see how much we can unravel from that. This is the index. So it is a list of cases against this poor woman. And as we've talked about so many times before, the case number, here's a 2020 case, 2019, 2019. These are in, I guess you'd call it descending order, with the older cases down here towards the bottom, 2014. You also have this letter code. Here's a traffic one. There's a misdemeanor or minor misdemeanor. Here's a CF, criminal, and the F in this county counts for felony. So we have a bunch of misdemeanors, and this court, their index lays out the court type so we can clearly see, even if you didn't understand these letters, misdemeanor, traffic infraction, misdemeanor, felony, that type of thing. We're going to start this chronologically. We're going to go back to 2014 and look at this first misdemeanor and take a look at that. So if I click on here, it brings me to case information, and from case information I can select this screen. This screen is the docket for that 2014 misdemeanor. Right away, looking at it, we can see it's for larceny. It's a petty theft. Now, if you were pulling the paper file down at the courthouse, every one of these entries would be a page or several pages that you could look at and read. They're not all available online. For example, here's this arrest record of not so much the arrest history, but her record of just that time. And then the next thing here is the criminal probable cause affidavit. Again, you're going to love these affidavits. That's kind of what you're looking for. You should be looking keyword in your mind for this type of thing. And if you see this symbol over here, it tells us that this document is available online. We're going to click on it and take a look. It brings up the first page of the criminal affidavit, the probable cause affidavit. And here's where we're going to find a lot of detailed information. We can see that Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office is the one that filed charges. I've redacted a lot of information here. It will be available for you when you do your background checks, but just for the sake of privacy for this poor woman. The defendant's name would be right in here. White female, born in 1984. And again, it's going to be an exact birth date. She's charged with petty retail theft, which is shoplifting. And come down here, the victim's name I've redacted, but it's a large store. You would know it if I told it to you. The victim is on Congress Avenue, so the phone number, all this kind of stuff. And then come down more into the affidavit on such and such a day in 2014. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. We can read firsthand what the officer has to say here. On such and such a date in 2014 at approximately 18:55 hours, which is 5 minutes till 7 in the evening, while working an extra duty permit at the victim's store on Congress, I was notified by loss prevention officer so-and-so of a theft in progress. So kind of interesting that this store had a police officer on what might be called special duty, or what looks like they call a permit down here. He goes on to say, I observed a white female subject, later identified as the subject, and a white male subject, later identified as that guy, take several items of clothing, conceal them in a brown backpack, and both subjects passed all points of sale without rendering payment, walked outside the store. That's pretty clear-cut case of theft right there. Do you have to leave a store in order to be charged with theft? No, not everywhere. No. If they can show that you have the intents of theft, that you can be stopped inside the store, and I've done it myself when I worked loss prevention. It's great to have them outside the store. I used to let 99% of the people step outside the store just to make my case stronger, but you don't have to. Upon inspecting their backpack, I discovered a men's shirt. This is the officer's affidavit goes on. Fruit skirt, 8 packs of boxers, and 2 packs of men's socks. Based on the above facts, I arrested both subjects for violation of Florida statute for retail theft. After gathering all the facts of the case, I placed the subject in handcuffs, which were checked for tightness and double locked. By the way, if you go over to my website, shadowanyone.com, keyword search handcuffs, you'll find at least a couple of articles. I know there's 2 on handcuffs. Well worth the time. Put people in handcuffs, do it properly, double lock them. That's all explained there. Plus, one of those articles is an awful lot of handcuff mistakes all cobbled together for you to paw through and learn from. The subjects were transported to the county jail without any further incident, the affidavit goes on. The officer says, issued a notice to appear with a mandatory court date for the male subject, and he was released at the scene without incident. Now, why the male subject was released and not her, I cannot tell from this affidavit, or at least not the first page. Probably she was carrying the bag. You see this in criminal lifestyles so many times. The woman is the one who's holding the stolen goods. She's the one that holds the dope. She's the one that holds the gun. A lot of times the men get a walk because they have the women hold these things. Part of the mentality is an officer is less likely to search a woman to find, say, that gun or that dope. But the net result, whether it's intentional or not, is women get disproportionately picked up when there's a couples crime like this. Now, the male half will be charged. He's clearly going to be charged and will have to answer to the judge for this. But notice that she's the one that ends up getting kept. And on closer inspection, I can see this actually is just a 1-page affidavit, so there's nothing else to see from this. However, whenever you're doing criminal histories, you need to know the disposition of the case, because if a person is just charged with a crime, they are not guilty. So this charges could have been dismissed, in which case that's a not guilty, then she did not commit shoplifting. If she was found not guilty, then she did not commit shoplifting. And you want to be careful when you report to clients, because you cannot be reporting a non-conviction thing. If they didn't get convicted, they didn't do it, you can't hold it against them. So let's take a look back at the docket information. And looking down through here, again, we can follow down the page a little bit. There's the arrest record, the criminal cause affidavit. But if we swing on down here, at very near the bottom is a guilty plea and adjudicated guilty by the court. So she pled guilty and the court accepted that guilty plea. We can look a little bit more at the docket if I click onto the next page. And you can see here some of the costs that were associated with this crime for her. She was charged $50 for the cost of prosecution, $50 a public defender's fee. If you are surprised that people are charged or have to pay when they're found guilty, that they have to pay for the honor of being prosecuted in court, don't be surprised. If you thought a public defender was actually something that's totally free, don't be surprised. Here she's paying $50. And when all was said and done, as with so many people, probably had difficulty paying because the case ended up being sent to a collection agency after the deadline. I'm going to go back to the criminal index for a moment. Remember, we're starting out looking at the very beginning of a criminal career, right down here at the bottom at this 2014. And we do have a mugshot of this person, and I want to share that with you because it becomes quite a thing later on in our story. Here is the subject of our investigation. She is 30 years old at the time. And if we go back and take a look at the probable cause affidavit, we do have a lot of information about our subject. And although I have redacted it, we do have a precise date of birth. But I can tell you this charge was in 2014. She was born in 1984. She is 30 years old in the mugshot. So 30 years old there. One interesting question you have to ask yourself at a time like this is, how in the world does someone not have a criminal record and then at 30 start with crime? Looking back at the index, we can see that after the crimes have started here in 2014, they continue on pretty unabated up to the present day. And so let's try to figure out why that is the case as we go on through through this background check. There are many traffic infractions here back again, also in 2014. And for a normal background check or skip tracing or anything, you might find a lot of interesting information in there, including address histories and different addresses that she's used. However, let's skip forward to 2015. We have this felony here and take a look at what that is. If we click on this case, again, I can go through the case information and click on docket, and that brings us right here. And right away, if we take a look at the beginning, heroin, cell, Schedule 1, possession of drug paraphernalia. So she's caught herself a heroin charge here. Again, just in 2014, if you were checking back then, you might have this theft charge and not be able to put together. But now you can clearly see there's heroin involved. That theft charge undoubtedly was something that was going to go getting merchandise to sell or trade for drugs. So you can see as we look down through here, we know the charge. Here's the arrest record, which is not available online. In the criminal probable cause affidavit, by this time in training, if you've watched enough of my videos, then you know this is something we're very interested in. But I want to take a moment, look down at this first appearance form, because I don't think we've looked at that, certainly not in this case. It's available online. If I click right here, that brings up this notice to appear, this arrest/notice to appear form. This has so much good information for you. And you'll see this in any case where there's an arrest. They'll have a form like this. Again, I've redacted the information that's redacted, but it's all there for you. She was arrested by the Boynton Beach Police Department. The location of the arrest was here at an intersection, a corner. She was arrested here again, and there's a specific date in 2015. We have the full name of the subject that I've redacted, white female. Again, I've cleaned up the date of birth there. Blonde, fair complexion, small build. And we know from that mugshot that at least when she was 30 or so, she was a fairly pretty gal. Here we are at age probably 31 the next year along. Marital status, single. Religion she lists as unknown. But also scars, marks, and tattoos. In this case is blank. A lot of times you'll find something in there. Local address. This is what she told the police was her address. And she listed her occupation as unemployed. Now, even though I say technically she told the police that was her address, you can look over here for the address source, and it looks like the Department of Motor Vehicles for Florida. So they probably had a driver's license or something for her. And in fact, if we look down at the driver's license number, which I've redacted, is right here. It's from the state of Florida. And I just want you to see this sheet to show you when you're able to, even if you're not able to pull these things up online, to go down to the courthouse and pull them, you'll learn a lot of things. Now, we've asked the question, why in the world would a woman start a life of crime at age 30? Here's the answer for you, or here's my belief on what the answer is. If you look over here at place of birth, Georgia. Okay, that tells me she was born in Georgia and moved to Florida, where these charges are. And you see this a lot. Somebody just has a criminal record that starts out of nowhere. You've got to consider that they have a previous history somewhere else. If I were to go back to her county of birth or where she grew up, I'll bet you I can find criminal histories back there. I'm not going to do that for purposes of this training, but it's easy enough to do. You take the place of birth, you punch it into your favorite search engine, you get a county, and then you go to the county clerk's office online, or if you're fortunate enough, you can go in person. There's probably a history before what we have found here, and that's good to know if you're doing a background check for someone. Imagine how excited, pleased your client would be for you to find out-of-state criminal records on a person. Let's scroll down a little bit more. Just there are now we're in kind of more the generic information, what she was charged with, possession of a criminal substance. I don't know why on the docket it said to sell. She's clearly just charged with possession, and she had a couple of pipes, probably crack pipes. That is our arrest information sheet. If we go back to the docket, we can move here from the first appearance form. Let's move back up to the criminal probable cause affidavit. It's going to give us a lot more detail. So here we are, page 1 of the criminal affidavit. You should be a little bit familiar with how these look now. Again, I've redacted information, but your subject's name is going to be in there. Here's the charge, again, white female, by the way, date of birth 1984, possession of criminal substance, heroin in this case, and possible possession of drug paraphernalia. Because this is a felony and there's no direct victim, drug abuse is a lot of times considered a quote-unquote victimless crime. They consider the victim's name is the state of Florida, and they list the address of the court here. But if this was a crime against an individual, you would find the victim's name, the victim's address, the victim's phone number, all of that listed here if that was something you needed. Scrolling down a little bit, we can see that here's redacted again, the date and month, but on 2015 at about 8:50 p.m., the narrative reads, on to this particular date, 2015, I, Officer so-and-so with the Boynton Police Department, was on duty in a marked patrol vehicle within the 300 block of Boynton Beach Boulevard, also known as State Road 804, when I observed a white male adult and a white female adult crossing State Route 804, traveling diagonally in a southeast direction. He goes on to write, swear, really, this is an affidavit, he's swearing out. It should be known that there are no crosswalks diagonally in this busy thoroughfare. With just a little bit of summary, I can tell you that shows they committed the infraction in Florida of jaywalking. Scrolling down a little bit more, a stop was conducted on the parties at East North 4th Street and State Route 804, at which time they were identified as white male so-and-so with such and such date of birth and white female our subject with such and such date of birth in 1984. While speaking to the subject, I observed her drop a green and white package of cigarettes with an open top near the front of my patrol vehicle. This is the woman that we're interested here for the background check. Retrieving the package, I observed via the open top several cigarettes as well as a glass tube with a burnt end. It's important that the officer notes that the top was open. It's plain view doctrine. He's seeing drug paraphernalia that's in plain view. Devices of this nature are known to me through my extensive training and experience in narcotics investigations to be improvised devices utilized to ingest through inhalation controlled substances, namely crack cocaine. That's a fancy way of saying he found a crack pipe. Due to the illicit nature of this item, and the cigarette package was seized and searched to which revealed an additional glass tube with burnt ends packed with steel wool. We've talked about that in previous training videos. The steel wool was used in crack pipes. A swab of each device later tested positive for cocaine. Based on this discovery, the subject was detained and her property subjected to a search pursuant to her lawful arrest for possession of drug paraphernalia in violation of Florida code. Said property was identified as a black drawstring backpack, which she was holding and had placed on the hood of my patrol vehicle upon being stopped. All right, there's your drug paraphernalia charge. Where do you see your drug possession, your heroin possession charge? Let's go to page 2 of the affidavit. Again, the beginning of the affidavit, essentially identical. Lots of good information. Those details we've talked about before, but the narrative, if we scroll down, within said pack, an insulin type syringe was located which contained an unknown type liquid. A green in color broken coin purse, which was also located, which contained several pieces of burnt steel wool, was found with the ends of an improvised crack pipe, yada, 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 as well as a clear capsule, which in turn contained an off-white brownish powdery substance, which I believed through my training and experience to be a Schedule I controlled substance, heroin. A small portion of the remaining substance was placed into a field test kit, and it tested positive based on the presence of heroin within the small capsule. The officer goes on to swear in his affidavit, I now believe the liquid within the syringe also to be heroin powder mixed with an unknown type of liquid, making it readily available to inject into the body. Now, I will, just as an aside, I will tell you, I have seen this so many times on surveillance. I can see a person sometimes will sit down on a bench. They'll put a bottle of water between their legs, open up the top, kind of hold it with their thighs, start to dig into a purse and pull out that needle. And you just know they're going to dip that needle down into the water bottle, draw out some water. And I see it with heroin, but I also see it with mixing it with crushed up pills that way to inject. So just a little heads up, when you see that water bottle being held between the thighs and with the cap off, you might be looking forward to a syringe coming out shortly thereafter. The officer goes on to say in his affidavit, the subject was charged accordingly with 1 count of possession of heroin and taken into custody, transported to the police department. She was processed and then transferred into jail. The officer goes on to say, without query, in other words, without asking her, the subject made admissions of guilt to actual possession and ownership of the improvised crack cocaine pipe, however, denied knowledge of the presence of heroin. You know, no dummy. And when you're dealing with people on the street, don't think that you're smarter than them. First of all, they've been through whatever they're going through a lot more than you know about. She knows enough not to fess up to the felony heroin. I mean, she would be more than happy to cop a citation or even a guilty plea on the crack pipes, but she's not fessing up to that heroin. Just out of thoroughness, because this is how you do it, the officer goes on to say that the subject was issued a citation also for her pedestrian violation. She did not get a pass on the jaywalking, which was what started the whole thing out. I mean, let's face it, the reality is the officer saw a couple of drug addicts and he made a stop based on the jaywalking, which is legitimate. If you read my book, 51 Dirty Tricks Bad Guys Really Hate, this is one of them. Why do I call it a dirty trick? It's not really fair. I mean, you can get anybody for jaywalking almost any time, but it's legal. It's legal to stop someone for jaywalking and then to further your investigation from there. If you're wondering what happened to the male half out of this case, because she was walking with a man, the officer goes on to say the male half, having no wants or warrants, nor possession of any illicit substance, was allowed to depart the area without incident. The dope and the crack pipes were submitted to evidence. Okay, again, this poor gal, you're seeing where she's taking the full brunt of the charges, and this guy is getting a pretty easy walk. This happens over and over again. You'll see it a lot. Again, during any background check of criminal cases, the disposition is very, very important. Let's click back over to the docket and see if we can determine a little bit of the disposition there. If we go down through, we can see that right here, a plea sheet was issued. She waived her rights. And there's a guilty plea down here. It was adjudicated guilty by the court, which means the court accepted her guilty plea. What did she get? Okay, you can find what the criminal actual sentence is 2 different ways. I'm going to show you first in the docket and then in the documents. Here in the docket, you can see she was sentenced to 140 days in Palm Beach County Jail. She was credited with 68 days. What this tells you, and you can't see all specific dates, I just had to block that out a little bit for her privacy, but this drug on for a while. This felony case did not unfold over a weekend, and so she ended up doing 68 days in jail before she pled guilty and was found guilty. So she was sentenced to 140 days. She was given credit for the 68 days she served and was let out then with the remaining days, what you call on the shelf. So she'll be on some sort of probation or some kind of court supervision. And if she violates again, they can give her those days that they've suspended at this point in time. She can carry out her sentence concurrent. I mean, it's at the same time for counts 1 and 2. If they wanted to be really mean about it, they could make her serve all of her time for count 1 and then start her count 2 time separate. But they're allowing her to serve time both ways, or both at the same time. It says the defendant can get day for day credit at an inpatient treatment facility, such as DAF, whatever that is, something in Florida, I'm sure. You know what? That is good and powerful. She doesn't have to serve the jail time if she'll get help. Now, the reality of the matter is she can't afford an inpatient care facility. She's not going to be able to do that. Even if she's interested in getting clean, and with an addiction like this, that is a really rough call to make, to decide that she wants to get clean. A lot of people want to, just a very painful process. They did additionally revoke her driver's license for a year. You can see there that guilty plea and adjudicated guilty by the court. So these are not inputted in exact chronological order, but you can clearly see what's happening. Let's scroll down a little bit more. Go to the next page, actually. So now you can see she got a $1 fine, which is kind of interesting, plus 5%, plus $20. I'm sure that's a court cost type processing thing. Interesting fine. There might have been some sympathy there for the woman. She did, however, she did get charged with $413 for court cost. Again, she's paying for the privilege of being prosecuted. Her public defender application fee. Did you know you had to pay an application fee to get your free public defender? Oh, by the way, your free public defender cost her $100 as well. They did give her 150 days to pay and a due date on there. If you find yourself or you're down in court and you're watching people getting sentenced, it's very common and not offensive at all to the judge. If you're given a fine, even a relatively small fine of $100, but you can say to the judge, can I have some time to pay that? Can I do it over 90 days, 6 months? The judges are just really, in my experience, okay with giving you extra time for that. And again, you're seeing some reiteration of the guilty plea and the time that she was given. Again, there's this reminder of her day for day that she can get as an inpatient, and at the very bottom, due within 365 days to be paid through the clerk of court's office. I want to take you one more page into the docket. Here's this fine that she has can be paid by the defendant by community service at a rate of $10 per hour within 365 days. That's kind of nice. I mean, again, we're talking 2014, $10 an hour, not all the money in the world by any stretch. But man, if you're genuinely trying to pull it together, and you can do it with community service because you're having trouble holding a job, getting a job. I mean, you've got this felony conviction under your belt now. Honestly, more of a break than a lot of law and order people would want a person to have. But honestly, why not give people a chance? Additionally, per the court, the defendant may do NA or AA meetings in lieu of court costs at $10 an hour. So if she will just go get this help, and there's a financial pressure now. Think about it. The bills are stacking up. What you owe the courts is stacking up. There is an interest rate on that. Maybe it gets to the point where the defendant says, you know what, I'll just do the meetings so I can pay this off as best I can and maybe get some help that way. I'm all for that. Did any of that happen with our subject? No, it did not. If you scroll down much into the future, into 2016, you can see the case was sent to a collection agency. The docket is technically a summary, so don't miss that. If you want to see specifics or you need a good solid printout for your client or for a case file of the disposition and the fines and that type of thing, we can actually look at the form. I'm going to click over here. Here is page 1. And notice the name of it. It's a court event form. So if you didn't know your resources in your area and you're just looking for sentencing information, you might miss this, but it's called a court event form in this county. And it's going to have the case number over here and the defendant's name, the whole 9 yards. If we scroll down, here you're going to find these lines are the particulars of the court cost, $413. There's a total here, $584, but it's broken down by the public defender application fee. We talked about the public defender fee. And then It's broken down even case by case, charge by charge. Here's your 140 days in jail, the 68 days credit. She was required to give 2 DNA samples. But here again, this day for day credit that she's offered, I'm going to go and click on page 2. And here's the second portion of that with the case number and the sentencing information. So here's our defendant. This is that mugshot from just 1 year earlier. This is going to wrap up part 1. In part 2, again, we're going to look at prostitution stings as this woman's life spirals downward. If you have an empty spot on your prayer list, please plug in our subject, because she could certainly use it, as anybody that's struggling with addictions can. But in part 2, we're going to talk about prostitution stings, get a real behind-the-scenes look at those, and 2 very different outcomes that came from 2 very different stings. The next time that we have a mugshot for her is a mere 4 years later. Here she is at 30 years old. Let me show you what she looked like just 4 years later at 34. Rough life right there. How in the world does a woman go in just 4 years from A to B? How does someone spiral downward this much? It's drugs and drug abuse. Absolutely make sure you check out part 2 for that extended training. One of the most interesting things, and this applies directly to you if you're a privacy nut like I am, she commits her first violent felony in part 2. Most important though, how she got caught and how that relates directly to you. Please remember that I'm able to offer this training for free because it is supported when people buy my courses, the Investigator's Ultimate Guide to Process Serving, the Investigator's Ultimate Guide to Surveillance, or any one of the books that I have out there, including if you're interested in this type of deep dive information, sources and methods, be sure to check out 51 Weird Private Investigator Tricks That Actually Work. That's kind of where I'm pulling from for this training material in this video. In the meantime, this is Larry K with ShadowAnyone.com. Remember, do the right thing, even if it's the hard thing.